Hi there, team, and welcome to another update on the volcanic eruption going on in Iceland. Today is Sunday, September 1st. I'm Geology Professor Shawn Willsey. Thanks for joining me. It is also about 8 a.m. here, Mountain Daylight Time. That would put it about 2 p.m. over in Iceland. We're going to do a pretty brief update today. Not a whole lot of new data to look at, although there is a few things of interest. And then I have some great graphs and data analysis from viewer Bruce Gardner I want to share with you, along with a few other tidbits. So thanks again for joining me. Appreciate your support of the channel. Well, the weather over there in Iceland today is not so awesome. It's cloudy, it's stormy, it's windy, and the best webcam view, which really just cleared up in the last few minutes, this has been a bit obscured over the last few minutes as I was preparing for this update, is the Sandhol camera, which looks from the east towards the west. But you can see the cone, the spatter construct here, and still these two vents, side-by-side vents, probably linked in the subsurface, but these vents are the last vestiges of this eruption that began on August 22nd. You can also see the height of fountaining, and the vigor of the eruption has dissipated quite a bit. So it seems like it's slowing down. Seems like, and this could chug along for another week or so, but it does seem like this eruption is really winding down for the most part. Okay, so let's move on to a couple of other things here. There's no new Met Office update. Likely they'll get one out tomorrow on Monday, usually when they put those out. And then also tomorrow, this is worth noting, which is September 2nd, our good friend Isak Finnbogason, who does the great drone flights over the area, he and I have been coordinating a bit, and we're going to actually collaborate tomorrow at the end of his live stream. So his live stream, I think, will begin around 4 p.m. Iceland time. And at 5:30, I'll jump on his last little flight out over the eruption area. The weather looks pretty good tomorrow, and I'll be able to provide some commentary while he's flying the drone. So this is really, I think, the best of both worlds, getting a little bit of my scientific analysis along with his amazing and impeccable drone flight skills. And then after that flight, if you switch over, so that'll be on his channel at around 5:30 or so Iceland time tomorrow. Then at 6 p.m. his live stream will end when that flight ends. But then if you switch over to my channel, we'll do a little bit of a debrief. We'll do another live stream. We'll do some question and answer and just talk about what we've been able to see there on that on those flights. So thanks as always to all those who can make that possible and be able to attend. And thank you to Isak for being willing to collaborate with me on that. That should be really fun. So, okay, let's look at some of the data then. Earthquakes, not a whole lot going on. Earthquakes are very much reduced over what we've seen the past couple days or weeks. If we throw all the earthquakes in there, you can see only 3 in the last 24 hours around the eruption site. And so this data set here, not showing us a whole lot in the way of datas or earthquakes. And we don't expect to see a lot of instructive information coming from the seismic data going into the next few weeks anyway. But once we get the system repressurized, once that magma storage zone is filled or filling, then we will want to look for the earthquakes as a possible indicator of where and possibly a little bit of when as well. Looking at the last week, the seismic data, pretty much just all clustered right around the eruptive vent and that fissure system that was the last to open up at the end towards the as the eruption progressed on August 22nd. So pretty much confined to that zone right there, even throughout the Reykjanes Peninsula. So there's our earthquake data. There's a few over here near Lake Kleifravatn. Again, just sort of the typical on and off earthquakes, tectonic quakes we've seen in the past. GPS data is starting to be a bigger story and a little bit more interesting. So we've been waiting to get enough days under our belt to really see what's going on here. Let's start with the 8-hour run of data. So let's go to Svartsengi, which is the one we often look at, and get myself out of the way as normal. But what you can see here, looking at the GPS data, which tracks the elevation of the surface at this specific location where the instrument is, the up and down motion. So there it is, inflating, the elevation rising as the magma pressure and volume was building. That culminated with the eruption on August 22nd. But since then, what you can see, there was a downturn. The deflation continued, but now we've leveled out, and it might even be a little bit of an upturn. I think as we look at some of the other GPS stations, you probably will be able to convince yourself that this is turning into an inflationary trend over these last few data points here over the last 3 or 4 days. Let's check real quick here. Yeah, if we go to like Elvorp, I think it's a little more clear. So you can see that a little bit of a upturn there in the data. And this is what we expect because this is what we saw with the May 29th eruption as well. If we buzz down to the 4-hour data runs, and let's go to Svartsengi first here, you can definitely see that it's bottomed out, right? We're not trending downward anymore. If anything, the trend here looks like it might be a little bit of an uptick. And you can see that on several of these here, depending on which station you pick and choose. If we go to Thorpjord, this station here, you can see that as well. So it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues moving forward. It should. That's what we'd expect based on what we saw with the May eruption. So the GPS story getting kind of interesting. No new INSAR data. I think the weather's been so bad they haven't been able to see through the clouds to measure the ground elevation. But once we get a couple clear days and the satellite passes overhead, it'll be interesting to see if we get some of that ground deformation data that jives with what we think we're seeing with the GPS data. Okay, next thing I want to do then, that was kind of it for the data, kind of a quick run through the data. But Bruce Garner, one of our great viewers who does a lot of analyses with some of the data, sent me several graphs. So let me pull these up and bring these over to you and show you some of the stuff he's been working on and see if I can explain these as best I can. Let me also pull up his email here on the other screen so I can make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything. So what he has here on this first graph is this is several GPS stations starting with the May 29th eruption. And so you can see everything dropping during the eruption. And then similar to what we talked about with the GPS data we just looked at, everything kind of trending down, some deflation for a while, but then everything trending up as the system was reinflating over the course of the summer, June, July, first half of August, and then dropping again with this last eruption on August 22nd. What's interesting here, let's see, what does he have here? Yeah, so this shows that pretty nicely. Again, all the different colors are just different GPS stations in the area, but they all sort of are trending and tracking and showing the same sort of thing. But what's interesting here is how far it dropped on this last eruption. I think he says this is the first, I think we'll see it on the next graph here in a second. This is the first eruption that we've had of the series where after the eruption, the elevation of these GPS stations was lower than it was for the prior eruption. So here's his next graph, which goes back all the way to last fall. So here we are last October. And just pick any one of these lines, doesn't matter for the most part. They all show the same trend. The November 10th intrusion, the December 18th eruption is the first little downward tick right here, or the one after the November 10th one. January 14th, February 8th. So you can see with each one of these that it drops, but it doesn't drop as far as the drop for the preceding eruption. But over here on the right, you can see that, make sure I'm like out of the way. I lost my my view here. Okay, I'm out of the way. Good. I'll keep myself really small down here. But you can see with this August 22nd eruption, the down drop, the decrease in elevation is actually lower than what we saw after the May 29th eruption, which is interesting. So possibly indicating, that we've emptied out it's most likely related to the fact that we've emptied out a much larger amount of that magma that was in the system than we did previously, whereas all these other eruptions emptied some volume of magma, but not as much as we see here. So that's pretty interesting. Continuing on with the data, getting the email back up so I can also read that with him. Okay, so the next thing he's got here is looking at the earthquakes. There's where all the the GPS stations are. But now he's tracking earthquakes since the, let's see, since, yeah, last fall. So here's the earthquakes last fall, not much. Everything spikes in late October as that magma works its way into that shallow system, starts filling that shallow reservoir, breaking rock, accommodating more space. And then you can see you can really see each eruption with each little spike here. So we have the January 14th one. Here's the December 18th. Each one of these spikes in the data is one of the eruption events. He takes out, in this next graph, he takes out the very tiny earthquakes, which are kind of noisy. And then with red and pink lines here, he's indicating when the eruptions began. So each one of these big red lines is one of the eruptions. And let's see, he says, I've surrounded the period October 25th, which is about here, to November 20th in pink lines. This was a very busy time. Yeah, so this was all associated with the intrusion. So that's why we see such a lot of earthquake energy being expended in this time period. This was the magma moving from the storage zone, injecting itself to the east and forming the dike, which has fed all the subsequent eruptions. Okay, then the next graph, trying to work my way through these here. And then over here, the last line is the August 22nd eruption. So the next one here is just without the lines. So that's just the same thing, but without the lines, just the graph as it is. Then what he has is, and this is kind of interesting, plotting up all the earthquakes for different time periods associated with those big events. So we know we had earthquakes running up to the November 10th intrusion, and you can see sort of the distribution of earthquakes here. You can see some of the red dots here kind of gridded, and he says that's because the latitude and longitude is to 6 decimal places, and they form a grid pattern when there's a lot of them close together. So that just means it's a high density when you sort of get this grid pattern here. And so you can see it's a little bit more evenly distributed in sort of a northeast southwest trend, but more east-westish here. But then when it actually forms the intrusion here on November 10th, you can really see those earthquakes following that magma body, that dike in the subsurface. Pretty interesting. And then going from that point through the rest of November, just even more pronounced pattern of earthquakes associated with that intrusion event. And then let me go back a bit because he actually has a video. Well, let's go ahead and finish these out, and then maybe we can look at the video he sent me. So then what he has here is some more dates. So this is just looking at the earthquake pattern. So now we're looking at the earthquake pattern for this is right after the eruption, right? Yeah. The comparison of earthquakes on the date of the eruption. So here is December 18th. Bit kind of noisy here, but you can see just where everything kind of lays out. I think the whole point of his analysis here is just comparing where the earthquakes occurred for each one of these eruptive events. So a little bit more distributed, December 18th. This one, of course, we know erupted further to the north. January 14th, you can see how much further south those earthquakes track. And this, of course, was the eruption that was furthest south that destroyed 3 homes in the town. So you can see that distribution of earthquakes there. February 8th, everything goes back to the north. So the vent ends up opening further to the north away from Grindavik. And this was the eruption that produced a flow that went over here and disrupted the pipeline from the power plant. And then let's check out these down here. Oh, sorry. So March 16th here. Not a lot going on March 16th, but remember March 16th was preceded by the March 2nd intrusion. And so this one, we didn't see a lot of earthquakes, probably because that March 2nd intrusion had already established a pathway for the magma to erupt 2 weeks later. The May 29th eruption, interesting, a little further south, but luckily the vents were more towards the north end here. And then the August 22nd one, our most recent event, which started with those earthquakes there, and then they actually took off a little bit to the north. So some interesting stuff there from him. Oh, he's got one more here that compares the 2nd to the 16th of March. This is interesting. So notice there's a lot more earthquakes on March 2nd. That was not an eruption date. That was an intrusion that broke a lot of rocks. We had a lot of earthquakes there because rock was breaking as the magma was being injected. And then that didn't actually culminate with an eruption for another 2 weeks. And at that point, the earthquakes were quite reduced because most of that seismic energy breaking rocks was expended back on March 2nd. So, okay, so then he's got to wrap this part up here. He has two cool little videos he put together. So let me see if I can walk you through these and while I let them play. So here, this first video is... so just for reference here, the red dot is the power plant. So this is pretty much north-south, but he's going to rotate it. So here's your longitude lines running north-south. This is for a time period of, what's the time period for? Oh, yeah, this is before November 10th. Oh, here we are at the bottom. Yeah, August 25th. Going up to December. So I'll just let this run. Grindavic's down here where the green dots are. So he's just kind of rotating it in three-dimensional space. This is the October 25th to November 9th before the intrusion. So that's looking at those earthquakes there. Then he's going to switch here to the intrusion earthquakes. So we're just getting a good look at those in three-dimensional space, plotting their locations and their depths. So you can kind of see some of the alignment there. This one, again, more east-west trending. As we switch over to, now he's switching to the November 10th, the intrusion. You can see how beautifully those plot up more or less along that southwest-northeast trend there. Just rotating it so we can see those kind of in alignment there when we're looking along their trend and sort of in profile view, looking at them sideways. And then the last one here is he's going to click on is the everything after the intrusion. So this is November 12th and on. And this may be all of them together. I think this is adding those earthquakes in there. They're just color coded. Yeah, that's what's going on. So those green earthquakes are the ones that came in after the intrusion. So really cool. Like a nice way to plot those up. So thanks to Bruce for doing that. And then one more from him. This is a video of the 6 sets of earthquakes. So those same earthquakes we just looked at with those maps with the red dots, now we're going to just look at those just with more of a three-dimensional view. So looks like we're starting here with the December 18th events. Remember the red dot's Fartsengi, the green is sort of the outline of the town, Grindavik. Blue dot is one of the big spatter cones, the main spatter cone that we've seen kind of pervasively. This color, this is January 14th, is darker blue, so further south into town. Now we're adding with green the February 8th earthquakes. So those plot up over here. But it is a nice view. I mean, you do get to see here spatially, if I can go back just a little bit, you can really see where these sort of plot up in three-dimensional view. And it helps us kind of see, is each one of these eruptions following the same or a very similar pathway? And I think when you see them plot up this close, although, they could be spaced out a few meters or tens of meters here, it does suggest that. So now we have the March 16th ones in yellow. There was not a whole lot of those because that was a low earthquake event. Orange here, now there's the May 29th event that reoccupied this spatter cone that formed with some of the previous eruptions, more or less. And then as he adds the August 22nd ones, the reds, those are further to the north. So interesting how, each one of these eruptions has really just filled in more linear space in that southwest northeast trend along this magma body. Makes you wonder, is it going to continue to expand in both directions? Because we've seen more in the north lately, maybe is it going to expand more in that direction? All good questions to ask, but great job by Bruce. So thanks so much for sending that. And then last thing I have here for you, friends, is I had another one of our viewers, Aston, who is in Iceland, lives in Iceland, and he got me turned on to this great site that has some really nice maps. And so as you zoom in here, it's a great job with all the geographic names, all the landform names in the area. So there's way more names here on this than I've ever seen on any of the other ones. If we kind of focus on, let me get you oriented first. So here's Grindavik, Blue Lagoon Power Plant, Stora Stokfeld here, and our current eruption site is somewhere up in here. Um, and so yeah, as you zoom in on this, it reveals more place names than I was aware of. So this is really nice in case we have more sort of geographic references. But the other reason this was fun, and he sent me this in his email, so thanks again to Aston for alerting me to this, is in one of my previous updates when we looked at the current lava field, and I did get an updated lava flow map from viewer David Gunzler, so thank you to him. But remember, I talked about this. There's this sharp line in the lava field, which actually coincides with. If you kind of zoom in here, you can see this fracture running across here. I don't like this. See how there's a shadow here from. So there's a way you can get around. If you ever see shadowing like this, that's because the right side of our image is from April 13th, 2023. The left side's from August of 2023. But you can fix that a little bit by picking a different date of the imagery and perhaps getting a better view. That's obviously worse. But that's a little bit better. So now I don't have the shadow thing. Anyway, the whole point here is that the lava field terminated quite abruptly along this linear trend. And I may have either I said it or maybe I implied that maybe this was a open fissure or fracture that the lava flowed into, which I think I was just spitballing at the time. And you can see there's several of these trends running across here. But what this actually is, and thanks to Aston for letting me know, is if we go back to this map he sent me here, and we switched our base map over to a digital elevation model, it shows up quite nicely here. So here's Litla Skogfelt, this hill right here, and then you can see this linear trend. This is what the lava flow ran into, and here it quite nicely shows up as not a open fracture, but this is an escarpment. So it's high on the left or west side and lower on this side over here. And in fact, this forms a valley that extends over to another feature over here. So this side, this is basically a little graben. So there's a fault running right through here that's higher on the left side or the west side, lower on the east side. Another fault system right here that's higher on the east side and lower on the west side. And so when that lava from the vent ran into this, it basically ran into more or less a wall, and it had to flow along the length of the wall before the height was low enough that it could flow around it. And that's what we see with this eruption right here. It actually flowed along this escarpment and then flowed around it. So essentially what this is a fault scarp. When we have a fault that has up and down motion, we'll have one side that's high, one side that's low. And so that displacement, that little cliff there, is what we call a fault scarp. So as we watch these lava flows, maybe with this eruption and maybe with the next eruption, progress across this landscape, it'll be interesting to see how the lava moves around and interacts with some of these. Now, not all of these are fault scarps. Some of these are either volcanic fissures or open fractures. You can see it flowed right across a couple of these other ones that looks the same. But this one in particular here was a fairly pronounced fault scarp. And I do know a little bit of the little Icelandic. I know Dalir is, I think, a valley. So that makes sense here that this Mosa Dalir would be named a valley in between these fault scarps here. If you want to see what these look like on the ground, I did do a video out to near the west, near the tip of the Reykjanes Peninsula. There's a little tourist spot where there's a bridge over a big fracture or fissure. And this is a fault scarp right here. So this is similar to what that lava flow ran into, with a high This was produced by faulting. This side went up, where you can see the cliff face here, and then the side closest to us here, where all this windblown sand sits, that would be the downdrop side. So I actually wanted to show you what this might look like on the ground. So you can imagine, I don't know that it's as tall as this one, maybe not, but you can imagine now the lava sort of running up against a topographic feature like this and then having to spread out laterally because it obviously can't overtop it, at least immediately. So, so there's a little view of something quite similar on the Reykjanes Peninsula. So there's lots of these little fault escarpments across the peninsula. And I'm sure if you get in here, and let me show you where that one was real quick while we're on this map. We can just go over here. And I believe it's one of these over here, I think. I might have to bounce back and forth. Yeah, here's the road. Yeah, I think it's this one right here, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the same feature. Yeah, there's the bridge right there over that little chasm. So that's a little parking area. We can double check that by just going back to the regular map, or maybe to their area one. Yeah, there we go. That works. So there's a little parking area. There's the bridge, and that bigger escarpment I was looking at was kind of right in here. So anyhow, so that's it for our update for today. I will be back with you tomorrow for the drone flight with Isak. So please join us for that if you can. Otherwise, you can catch the recording. And then moving into the rest of the week, we'll just kind of see how things look. Might not be doing these as often, but whenever I get things like Bruce's analyses and some of these other things I wanted to share with you, I'll put together an update. So hope you're well, stay well, and we'll see you next time. Take care.